My name is Lieutenant Colonel Audrey Kessler, and the moment I handed my identification card to the gate corporal, I already knew he had decided what I was. Not based on the system, not based on verification, but based on me. I watched it happen in his face first, that slight pause, that quiet smirk, the kind people wear when they think they've caught someone who doesn't belong. He tilted my card toward the morning light like it was counterfeit. Then he said, almost smiling, "You're going to need to turn this car around, ma'am." Behind him, someone was already recording. And I didn't move. Because I've learned something over 20 years in uniform. People don't question what they understand. They question what they think they've already figured out. And that was exactly where he had just made his mistake. The problem was that his conclusion was wrong. It was a few minutes before 9 o'clock on a warm Friday morning in June. I was sitting in the visitor lane outside one of the largest military installations on the East Coast. The driver's window of my rented silver sedan was down because the gate speaker had been malfunctioning all week. On the passenger seat rested a printed invitation bearing my younger brother's name. Colonel Ethan Walker, Change of Command Ceremony. I had folded the invitation carefully the night before in a motel room 11 minutes from the base. The same way I folded everything important. The navy blue dress I was wearing had spent the night hanging from the closet door. My mother's pearl necklace rested lightly against my collarbone. I had planned every detail of the trip. The route, the parking instructions, the ceremony schedule, the weather, everything. Everything except the gate guard. The corporal's name tape read Martin, 22, maybe 23. Sunburn across the back of his neck, square jaw. The particular confidence young men develop when they are given a little authority and a slow morning. Behind him stood another Marine, younger, leaning against the security booth, looking at something on his phone, laughing. Martin looked from my face to the card, then back to my face. Then he smiled. Not kindly. The way people smile when they believe they've caught someone. "You lost, ma'am?" I had heard versions of that question for most of my adult life. In conference rooms, on airfields, inside briefing centers, in countries I am still not allowed to discuss. The wording changed, the assumption never did. No. He tapped the card against his palm. This doesn't look right. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. What doesn't? The credential. It shouldn't. His eyebrows rose. That answer wasn't the one he expected. Behind him, the younger Marine pushed himself away from the booth, still holding the phone. "What is it?" he asked. Martin turned the card around. "You ever seen one of these?" The younger Marine glanced at it. Nope. Neither of them had. Unfortunately, ignorance and confidence often arrive together. "Where'd you get it?" Martin asked. "It was issued to me." The younger Marine laughed. Martin laughed too, not loudly, just enough. The kind of laugh meant for an audience. Cars were beginning to stack up behind me. Drivers were watching. People always notice humiliation. It attracts attention faster than excellence ever will. Martin lowered his voice slightly while making sure everyone nearby could still hear. "You know people buy fake government credentials online all the time, right?" I said nothing. "We had a guy last month carrying fake military awards in his glove compartment." The younger Marine chuckled. Martin picked up the invitation from my passenger seat, read the name, then looked back at me. The smile widened, like a detective who thought he'd solved the case. "Colonel Ethan Walker." "Correct. And your family?" "Yes." He folded the invitation shut. "There isn't any family clearance list at this gate." That wasn't entirely true. But explaining the truth would have accomplished nothing. People can only understand information that exists inside their world. Mine and his overlapped very little. A horn sounded somewhere behind me. Martin ignored it. The younger Marine adjusted his phone. Not enough to be obvious, enough to record. I noticed immediately. Years of experience had taught me to notice cameras. The angle, the posture, the way people pretend they aren't filming. I had become the morning's entertainment, the fake military woman, the impersonator, the story they would laugh about at lunch. Martin leaned against the doorframe. So here's what's going to happen. Authority had entered his voice now, authority he seemed to enjoy. You're going to turn around. I said nothing. You're going to drive to the visitor center. Still nothing. They'll figure out whatever misunderstanding happened. Then he smiled again. Or, there was always an or. Or we can make this a bigger issue. I looked directly at him. What kind of issue? His smile widened. Possession of fraudulent government credentials. The younger Marine laughed. The phone remained pointed at me, recording everything. Oddly enough, I wasn't angry, just tired. Because none of it was new. My entire career had been built on people underestimating things they didn't understand. Martin leaned closer. So which option sounds better? I met his eyes. There's another option. The smile faded slightly. What option? Scan the card. For the first time, uncertainty appeared. Tiny, almost invisible. But there. People who are bluffing avoid evidence. People who are lying avoid verification. I was inviting both. That bothered him. For a moment. Then pride won. Gladly. He turned and walked toward the security booth. The younger Marine followed, still recording. I watched them disappear inside. A warm breeze moved across the windshield. Somewhere beyond the gate, a flag snapped sharply in the wind. I rested both hands on the steering wheel and waited. Waiting was something I'd become very good at. Waiting for clearances, waiting for decisions, waiting for calls, waiting for people to discover they were wrong. Inside the booth, Martin inserted the card into the scanner. Even from outside, I recognized the sound immediately. Not because I heard it often, because hearing it usually meant somebody's day was about to change. One tone sounded, then another, then a completely different sequence, the kind of sequence that never occurred during routine verification. Silence followed. I couldn't see the screen. I didn't need to. Their faces told the story. The laughter disappeared first, then the confidence, then the certainty. The younger Marine lowered his phone. Martin stared at the monitor, reading, then reading again. The color began leaving his face, slowly, orderly. Forehead first, then the cheeks, then the mouth, until the sunburn on his neck looked painted on. Inside the booth, a telephone began ringing. An old-fashioned landline. Loud, sharp, urgent. The sort of phone that never rings unless somebody important requires an answer immediately. Martin stared at it. The younger Marine stared at him. Neither moved. The phone continued ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. Then I heard engines. Both Marines heard them too. 2 military police vehicles appeared around the bend in the access road, moving fast. Then deliberately not fast. The way professionals arrive when they've already been briefed. One vehicle stopped ahead of my sedan. The second pulled alongside the booth. Doors opened. Officers stepped out. The younger Marine lowered his phone completely. Martin remained frozen, still holding my identification card, now with both hands, the way people hold objects that have suddenly become dangerous. A military police sergeant stepped out of the lead vehicle, removed his sunglasses, looked at the scene once. The way someone reads a room they already understand. Martin tried to speak. "Sergeant, I was just..." The sergeant walked past him. Didn't stop. Didn't ask a question. Didn't request an explanation. He came directly to my window. The morning became very quiet. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was respectful, careful. The kind of careful that comes from knowing there are details you aren't cleared to know. Are you all right? I'm fine. Has anyone attempted to detain you? No. The sergeant nodded once. Nothing dramatic. Just acknowledgement. Then he stepped back and spoke quietly into his radio. Whatever answer came through caused the slightest change in his posture. Enough for me to notice. The younger Marine looked sick. Martin looked worse. Then another vehicle appeared. A black government sedan. It crossed the checkpoint and moved directly toward the gate. Purposeful. Controlled. Certain. The vehicle stopped beside the booth. The driver's door opened. A major stepped out. Perfect uniform. Sharp posture. Controlled expression. She carried my identification card in her hand, and the way she carried it told me everything. She had already seen the screen. The major walked directly toward my vehicle, past the Marines, past the military police, past everyone else. The entire gate seemed to hold its breath. She stopped beside my window, looked at me for a moment, then extended the card with both hands, and said one word. Ma'am. The major held my identification card for a moment longer before handing it back. Not because the card itself mattered, because of what it represented. Ma'am, she said quietly, on behalf of this installation, I apologize. Behind her, Corporal Martin stood perfectly still. The younger Marines stared at the pavement. Neither seemed interested in speaking anymore. The major continued. We have transportation prepared for you. That's unnecessary. Respectfully, ma'am, it isn't. I recognized the tone. The decision had already been made. Arguing would only waste time. The military police sergeant opened the rear door of the black sedan. I stepped out of my rental car. The pearls at my neck shifted slightly as I stood. A simple movement. Yet somehow every person at that gate watched it. Because the question had changed. 10 minutes earlier they thought they knew exactly who I was. Now nobody seemed entirely certain. As the sedan rolled through the gate, familiar buildings passed outside the window. Training facilities, administrative offices, flags snapping in the summer wind. Military installations always smell the same. Fresh-cut grass, diesel fuel, hot pavement. Memory. And memories have a way of finding you when you aren't looking for them. My father served 28 years in uniform. To me, growing up, he wasn't simply my father. He was gravity, the fixed point around which everything else revolved. When he walked into a room, conversations adjusted themselves. People stood straighter, laughed a little less loudly, paid attention. He had earned every ounce of that respect. And like most military children, I spent years chasing it. When I accepted my scholarship at 18, he was proud. I still remember my commissioning ceremony. He pinned my rank onto my uniform himself. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, from emotion. He asked the photographer to take the picture twice because he'd blinked the first time. That photograph sat on his desk for years. Back then, everything made sense. My assignments made sense, my deployments made sense, my future made sense. Then my career changed. And eventually I entered a world where explanations stopped being possible. The more important my work became, the less I could discuss it. At first, my father asked questions. What exactly are you working on these days? I wanted to answer honestly. I couldn't. So I gave him the approved version. Strategic planning, interagency coordination, analysis, liaison work. Every word was true. None of them meant anything. I watched confusion slowly replace pride, not because he stopped loving me, because he stopped understanding me. My younger brother Ethan never had that problem. Everyone understood Ethan. Promotions, leadership positions, command opportunities, achievements that came with ceremonies, photographs, applause. People knew how to celebrate those things. At family gatherings, relatives asked Ethan questions. They asked me if I wanted more potatoes. Nobody meant harm. That was the painful part. Cruelty announces itself. dismissal usually arrives wearing kindness. Thanksgiving of 2018. 12 people around my parents' dining room table. Good china, good tablecloth, good intentions. Ethan had just received a major promotion. Everyone was excited. My father stood and raised a glass. He spoke about sacrifice, leadership, responsibility, commitment. My mother cried. My aunt cried. Ethan looked embarrassed. It was a beautiful moment. Then my father turned toward me, smiled warmly, and raised his glass again. "And your sister found a different path." The room nodded, understanding, approval. Then he added the sentence I carried for years. "Not everybody wants that kind of responsibility." People smiled. Someone squeezed my shoulder. Someone complimented my work ethic. Everyone believed they were being supportive. What I heard was something else entirely. They thought I had chosen the easier road, the safer road, the smaller road. What none of them knew was that less than a year earlier, I had spent 4 sleepless days helping coordinate an operation whose details I will take to my grave. Lives depended on it. The operation succeeded. People came home because it succeeded. There would be no speeches about it, no photographs, no family stories, no holiday toasts, only silence. And silence has a dangerous habit. It allows other people to write your story for you. Over time, they stop asking questions. They fill in the blanks themselves. My father never told me he was disappointed. He didn't need to. Disappointment reveals itself in smaller ways. The questions people stop asking, the assumptions they start carrying, the stories they stop telling. By 2022, the family narrative had hardened into something permanent. Ethan was the success story. I was the dependable one, useful, capable, ordinary. Near the end of my father's life, he asked me something I have never forgotten. It happened in hospice. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic. Machines hummed quietly in the background. The strongest man I had ever known looked smaller than I remembered. Older, fragile, tired. He looked at me and asked, "Do you ever regret settling?" Settling, that was the word. For one brief moment, I considered telling him. Not classified information, just enough. Just enough for him to understand. Just enough to know he'd been wrong. Just enough to balance the scales. I almost did. Almost. Then I looked at him, and I realized something. The truth wouldn't help him. It would only leave him with questions I couldn't answer, regrets he couldn't fix, mysteries he couldn't solve. So I smiled, and I said, "No, Dad." My voice didn't shake. "I've had a good career." The relief on his face was immediate. The answer gave him peace. The truth never would have. A few weeks later, he was gone, and with him went the only opinion that had ever truly mattered. After his death, Ethan naturally inherited the role my father once occupied. Keeper of the family legacy, keeper of the military stories, keeper of the traditions. Everyone expected it, including Ethan, especially Ethan. He wasn't arrogant, he wasn't cruel. He simply believed the same story everyone else believed. The story where I had become competent but ordinary, successful but forgettable, useful but unremarkable. The previous summer, one of his officers asked what I did for a living. Before I could answer, Ethan laughed. "Oh, my sister handles administrative stuff." Administrative stuff. The conversation moved on. Nobody noticed I hadn't actually answered. That's the remarkable thing about assumptions. Once people accept them, they stop looking for evidence. The sedan slowed. I blinked and returned to the present. The base passed outside the window. The major sat across from me. Professional, quiet, careful. Eventually, she cleared her throat. "Ma'am," I looked up. "I want to apologize again for what happened at the gate." I smiled faintly. He was young. "Yes," she hesitated, then chose honesty. "But that's not an excuse." "No. No, ma'am, it isn't." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked out the window. You should know something. What? The gate incident is already spreading. That got my attention. The recording? She nodded. The younger Marine managed to send part of it before military police secured his phone. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course he had. The accusation portion? Yes, ma'am. Not the scanner, not the response, not the truth. Just the humiliation, the wound. That's how these things always travel. The accusation spreads faster than the correction. The major glanced toward me, then back toward the road. There's another issue. What issue? She hesitated. The slightest smile touched the corner of her mouth. The ceremony starts in less than an hour. I nodded. So? The smile grew slightly, and for the first time all morning, she looked almost amused. Someone at the ceremony had already heard about the gate. The major's words stayed with me for the rest of the drive. Someone at the ceremony had already heard about the gate. I wasn't sure what that meant. Military bases are small towns disguised as institutions. News travels fast. Embarrassment travels faster. By the time the sedan stopped outside the headquarters building, I had already decided not to think about it. Whatever happened at the gate would be handled by people whose job it was to handle it. My job was simpler. I was there for my brother, nothing else. The major escorted me to the entrance. Inside, Marines hurried through hallways carrying folders and radios. Families gathered near the auditorium. Officers adjusted uniforms. Children ran between rows of folding chairs. The familiar controlled chaos of a military ceremony. I thanked the major. She nodded, then paused. Ma'am? Yes? For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she simply smiled. Enjoy the ceremony. Then she walked away. I entered the auditorium alone. The room was already half full. Rows of chairs stretched toward the stage. Flags stood behind the podium. A military band was warming up near the rear wall, and there, surrounded by guests and officers, stood my brother. Colonel Ethan Walker. Tall, confident, well-respected, the center of attention, exactly where everyone expected him to be. My mother spotted me first. Her face brightened immediately. There you are, she hugged me tightly. We thought you got lost. I almost laughed, if only she knew. Ethan approached a few moments later. Perfect uniform, perfect smile. He pulled me into a quick hug. You made it. Of course. For a moment his expression softened. I wasn't sure. Why? He shrugged. Long drive. That was Ethan, never intentionally hurtful, just unaware. A lifetime of assumptions wrapped inside casual sentences. Then one of his officers approached. A captain, young, professional. Sir, they're ready for you. Ethan nodded. Before leaving, he gestured toward me. My sister. The captain smiled politely. The way.